Freud once wrote, "The great question that has never been answered, and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul, is, what does a woman want?" He wasn't being condescending. He was being honest, because what he saw, buried beneath social roles, beneath politeness, beneath even the fantasy of romance, was something far more unsettling, something most men still refuse to see, that the feminine psyche isn't chaotic, it's uncontainable, it is not broken, it is not incomplete, but it is a force, vast, complex and self-governing, and that terrifies the unconscious man, because he can't control what he can't predict, and he can't love what he still secretly fears. Freud was criticized for reducing everything to sex, but his deeper insight was never about pleasure. It was about power, the hidden drives that shape us, the unspoken motives beneath our words, the parts of ourselves that direct our behavior, even as we pretend we're choosing it. He called it the unconscious, and when it came to women, he saw something most people couldn't even look at, that the feminine psyche, for all its nurturing and empathy, also carries something wild, something irrational, something that doesn't submit to logic, to rules, to comfort. And unless a man learns how to recognize that force, he will be ruled by it, without ever understanding why. Freud noticed that many of the men who came to him were not just confused by women, they were haunted by them, haunted by their mothers, their lovers, their fantasies, their fears. On the surface, they were in control, but beneath it, their entire identity was shaped around what she thinks, what she feels, what she allows. Their confidence, fragile. Their purpose, performative. Their masculinity, a reaction, not a foundation. And here's the darkest part Freud saw. Most men don't actually love women. They fear them, worship them, idealize them, but they do not see them, because they've projected too much onto them. The mother they never pleased, the lover they never possessed, the goddess they hope will finally say, "You're enough." Freud saw that the feminine, in its rawest psychological expression, holds a kind of power that few men are prepared to face, a power to validate and destroy, the power to awaken and unravel, the power to reflect his deepest longing and his deepest shame. And when he has not faced himself, he cannot meet her as an equal, only as a symbol. But here's where it gets more subtle and more dangerous. Because Freud also saw that within the female psyche, there are forces she doesn't control either. Not because she is less conscious, but because her drives, her instincts, her projections often run deeper than her awareness. The same way men unconsciously worship the feminine, women, if not integrated, unconsciously test the masculine. And if this content is making sense to you, then click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Because the truth about the feminine psyche is not found in surface-level empowerment quotes. It's in the shadow, the part no one dares name. But Freud saw it. And now, you will too. The secret drives of the feminine, why her tests aren't tests at all. Men call it testing. They say she's testing their strength, testing their patience, testing their masculinity. But Freud saw it differently. He believed these weren't tests in the conscious sense. They were instinctual reactions, moments when a woman's unconscious animus, her internal masculine, is assessing not your performance, but your presence. Because here's what most men don't realize. The feminine psyche does not crave control. It craves containment, not as domination, but as direction, not as suppression, but as spiritual leadership. And when that's missing, she starts to fragment, not on purpose, not to manipulate, but because the masculine energy in the room isn't anchored. And a woman, especially one who hasn't integrated her animus, will unconsciously begin to test for that anchor. She'll push your edge, withdraw love, challenge your confidence, fluctuate between affection and fire, not because she's cruel, but because her own psyche is asking, can you hold the storm without becoming the storm? Freud saw that within the unconscious female psyche, there's a longing to surrender, but also a terror of it, a deep mistrust of the masculine, not because of one man, but because of generations of emotional abandonment, disempowerment, and unmet resonance. This makes her power both beautiful and unpredictable. She wants depth, but she fears being led. She desires safety, but she resists dependence. She craves truth, but she's learned to defend herself with chaos. And that's why what men interpret as emotional games are often unconscious survival strategies. This is why it's not enough to know what to say. It's not enough to be kind, successful, or attractive. The female unconscious is not looking for checklists. It's looking for sovereignty. She wants to feel your spine. She wants to sense that your soul is not for sale. She wants to experience a man who won't collapse when she burns a little too bright. And if you can't offer that, she'll never feel safe in your leadership, no matter how much she smiles, no matter how much she says she loves you, because her nervous system isn't convinced, and the unconscious doesn't lie. Freud knew this was dangerous terrain, because if a woman's masculine is unintegrated, if she's ruled by a tyrannical animus, she becomes cold, hyper-rational, emotionally reactive, and ultimately closed to love. And if a man is ruled by his anima, the part of him still craving to be mothered and rescued, he becomes compliant, apologetic, and emotionally enslaved. Together, they form what Freud called a neurosis of projection, two people reenacting childhood wounds, mistaking pain for chemistry, mistaking confusion for passion, calling dysfunction love, and unless both face their unconscious, they'll spend their lives blaming each other for the war within, why women lose respect for good men, and why it's not what you think. You've been told to be nice, to be consistent, to show up, to listen, to be the good guy, and yet, she pulls away. You offer softness, she tests you. You offer presence, she gets distant. You offer commitment, she says she's confused. And inside, you're screaming, I did everything right. Why isn't it working? Because what she really wants is not a man who follows the rules, but a man who radiates sovereignty. And Freud understood why this gets so twisted. He saw that the unconscious woman doesn't just respond to kindness. She responds to structure, to authority of energy, not dominance, not aggression, but that subtle signal of a man who knows who he is. And a man who's ruled by his need to be good is rarely that man. She doesn't lose respect because you were too kind. She loses respect because you were too available, too compromising, too emotionally flexible. You made her your center, and she felt it, not in your words, but in your gaze, in your nervous system, in your unconscious need for her to affirm you. And the female psyche, especially when ruled by a powerful animus, doesn't just want devotion, she wants direction. The nice guy doesn't give her that. He gives her availability. He gives her emotional labor. He gives her everything but the very thing that would make her feel safe. A man who doesn't need her to feel enough. Freud saw this in clinical patterns. Women leaving stable, loving men for emotionally unavailable ones. Choosing chaos over calm. Choosing inconsistency over commitment. But it wasn't about love. It was about archetypes. The unavailable man unconsciously reflects her own disconnection. He triggers her desire to win the father she never had, to finally be chosen by the one who never stayed. And a good guy? He reflects nothing back to her. No challenge, no mystery, no friction. And so she walks away, not because he was wrong, but because he wasn't rooted. This doesn't mean become distant. It doesn't mean suppress your feelings. It means reclaim the one thing you've abandoned to be liked, your center. Because if you orbit her moods, her validation, her emotional availability, you are no longer a man in relationship. You are a man in emotional servitude. And the feminine, no matter how evolved, will never open to a man who is more obedient than he is embodied. Freud's work reminds us the dynamics between men and women are rarely logical. They're psychological, mythical, archetypal. So stop asking, what does she want? And start asking, what energy am I bringing to her nervous system? Because if it's the energy of need, she will lose respect, not by choice, but by instinct. The animus unleashed. How women become emotionally dangerous when unconscious. Carl Jung named it. Freud hinted at it. And men across generations have felt it, without ever understanding what it is. The moment when a woman, once soft, inviting, radiant, becomes cold, criticizing, domineering, emotionally untouchable. You try harder. She pulls back. You explain. She mocks. You give her everything. And she resents you for it. What just happened? The animus took over. The animus is Jung's name for the unconscious masculine inside every woman. It is her inner voice of judgment, logic, rationality, control. And when it's integrated, it makes her powerful, clear, discerning, sovereign. But when it's unconscious, it becomes a tyrant. Suddenly she speaks in absolutes, interrupts your intuition, mocks your vulnerability, tests your strength, not to see if you pass, but to prove you'll fail. And here's what Freud and Jung both understood. The unconscious feminine doesn't want to dominate, but when she's lost contact with her emotional body, her tenderness, her intuitive rhythm, she doesn't feel safe surrendering. So her animus steps in and takes over. You'll see it in her words, her tone, her eyes. She becomes all critique, no connection, all control, no curiosity. She doesn't want to hear your truth. She wants to win, not because she's toxic, but because she's disconnected. And the deeper truth? She doesn't want to be this way. She's exhausted by it. But she can't stop, because she's now living in survival mode, performing masculinity not to attract you, but to protect herself from you. Freud never used the word animus, but he saw the same dynamic. Women whose emotional depth had been denied, mocked, or wounded, who then grew sharp, intellectual, performative. He saw that this wasn't empowerment, it was compensation. A woman raised to distrust men will unconsciously become one internally to guard herself. But here's where it gets dangerous. If you, as a man, are ruled by your own unconscious anima, if you're unsure of your center, craving her validation, surrendering your energy just to stay close, then her unhealed animus will devour you. You'll think you're in love, but you're in a psychological war. You'll confuse her contempt for passion, her withdrawal for depth, her dominance for strength. But what's really happening? Two psyches in conflict, two unconscious archetypes locked in a dynamic of projection, fear, and unmet childhood wounds. And the more you appease her, the colder she becomes. Not because she hates you, but because she can't respect what she can control. This is the hidden truth. A woman's animus cannot love a man she has domesticated. The feminine mirror. Why your deepest wound will always feel like a woman. You think it's her, the way she left, the way she made you feel small, the way she flipped from affection to absence like it meant nothing. But it was never just her. It was what she reflected. Freud believed that many of our romantic attachments are not chosen. They're triggered by unconscious memories, by emotional echoes, by unfinished business from the past. You don't fall in love. You fall into a psychological pattern, and for most men, that pattern has a female face. The woman you can't forget. She mirrors your earliest unmet longing, not because she intends to, but because your nervous system recognizes her. The emotional roller coaster feels like home. The unpredictability feels like a chance to finally win. But what you're trying to win is not her heart. It's the mother you couldn't reach, the approval you never earned, the wholeness you abandoned to be accepted. And she, unknowingly, becomes your mirror. This is why it hurts so much when she pulls away. Not because you lost her, but because you feel like you lost yourself. The version of you that felt seen, the version that felt hopeful, the version that finally believed he was enough. Freud called this transference. When you assign the energy of someone from your past to someone in your present, It's not love. It's longing with a storyline. And the truth is brutal. Until you recognize this, you will keep meeting different women with the same emotional blueprint. Hot and cold, spiritually vague, emotionally inconsistent, alluring and unavailable. They'll light you up, break you down, then vanish. And you'll call it bad luck. You'll call it just how women are. But really, it's your own psyche trying to get your attention. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Freud would agree, because he saw that every woman who wounded a man was simply mirroring the place he had not yet healed. This is why the feminine can feel so overwhelming, because she doesn't just hold love, she holds reflection. She doesn't just offer beauty, she offers the image of your own fragmentation. And if you haven't done the work, you'll either worship her or resent her. But you won't be able to see her, because all you'll see is your wound. The soul isn't found in her, it's found in what she triggers in you. You swear it's her laugh, her silence, her presence, her depth. You say she awakens something you've never felt. You call it connection, alignment, fate. But Freud, and later Jung, would say something else entirely. She is not your answer. She is your trigger. She didn't awaken something new. She activated something forgotten, something buried, something unresolved. And that's why she feels spiritual, because for a brief moment, she connects you to the part of yourself you stopped believing in. Your sensitivity, your hope, your wildness, your poetry, your soul. But instead of turning inward, instead of reclaiming that part as yours, you assign it to her. This is where projection becomes worship, and worship becomes slavery. Because when she leaves, and she always leaves emotionally or physically, you don't just feel heartbreak, you feel abandonment. But here's the truth. She didn't abandon you. She abandoned your projection. And what hurts is losing the part of yourself you refuse to own. Freud's work teaches us something sobering. The soul you're chasing in her is actually your own. You just forgot how to see it without her reflection. She is not your missing piece. She is the mirror. And the mirror always cracks when touched too hard. You say, "She changed. She stopped loving me. She became someone else." But what really changed was your illusion. You projected your anima, the inner feminine, onto her body. You made her your muse, your healer, your meaning. And she played the part until she couldn't. Because no human can carry the weight of your unconscious. This is the moment of awakening, when you finally stop asking, "How do I get her back?" and start asking, "What part of me did she make me feel connected to?" Because that's the real work, the real gift. And until you do that, you'll keep falling for the same symbol, thinking it's a soulmate. You don't need to chase her. You need to meet yourself in the space she used to fill, in the silence she left behind, in the ache you keep trying to avoid. Because if you can sit there, if you can feel it fully, you will discover what she only hinted at, that your soul was never missing. It was just waiting for you to come home. What Freud actually meant by "what does a woman want?" and why most men misunderstand it. What does a woman want? The quote echoed through Freud's entire career, not because he couldn't find the answer, but because he knew there wasn't one. At least, not the kind most men are searching for. Not a checklist, not a formula, not a hack. Because what a woman wants isn't linear, it's layered, it shifts. It reveals you far more than it reveals her. Freud wasn't confused about women. He was mystified by how little men understand the complexity of the feminine, how men crave predictability, while the feminine thrives on presence, how men want clarity, while the feminine flows in emotional currents that aren't always meant to be explained, only felt. When Freud asked this question, he wasn't asking for the sake of answers. He was pointing to the depth of the feminine soul, a depth that cannot and should not be fully grasped by the logical mind. because to reduce her to something graspable is to miss her entirely. Here's what Freud saw, and what Jung would later expand. A woman doesn't want to be fixed. She wants to be felt. She doesn't want your certainty. She wants your capacity to stay present in her storm. She doesn't want you to conquer her mystery. She wants you to honor it. She doesn't want your obedience. She wants your grounded, heart-led leadership. Leadership that does not collapse under pressure and does not flinch when she becomes a mirror for your fears. When a man demands a woman to make sense, he's asking her to amputate her soul. When he demands her to be more consistent, he's asking her to betray her natural rhythm. And when he asks her, "What do you want from me?" he's often asking from fear, not from curiosity, because the feminine doesn't want anything from you. She wants something with you, an experience, an energy, a feeling of safety inside chaos, of being held without being tamed. And most men misunderstand this. They think it's about gifts, or romance, or being alpha, or being sensitive. But none of those things matter. If your nervous system isn't clear, she doesn't feel your words. She feels your root. So the real answer to Freud's question? A woman wants you, not the version of you that performs, not the version that conforms, not the version that seeks permission to lead. She wants the man who has integrated his anima, the man who no longer fears the storm inside himself, the man who can sit in stillness and make her feel like nothing in the world could shake him. That's the man she opens to. That's the man she respects. That's the man she wants. Final integration. What Freud and Jung together can teach you about becoming whole. Freud gave us the map. Jung handed us the mirror. But the journey? That's yours. Because understanding the feminine psyche isn't about mastering her. It's about mastering the parts of yourself that she awakens, disturbs, mirrors, and challenges. Freud taught us that the unconscious rules far more of our behavior than we admit. Jung expanded that truth into the language of symbols, archetypes, and spiritual patterns. And together, they reveal a truth few are ready to face. You're not chasing love. You're chasing integration. That woman who ruined you, she didn't ruin you. She revealed you. She revealed your projections, your need for approval, your longing to be seen by someone because you haven't learned to see yourself. And her unpredictability? Her silence, her emotional intensity, it wasn't designed to destroy you. It was a mirror for the chaos you never sat with, a mirror for the boy inside who still aches to be chosen, a mirror for the man inside who is still afraid of being fully seen. The truth? You don't need her to reflect your power anymore. You need to return to it, because the more you withdraw your projection, the more you reclaim the pieces of yourself you've scattered across every past relationship. The need for validation, a fear of rejection, a craving to be saved, the ache for intimacy you haven't created with yourself. The more powerful you become, not because you learned to seduce women, but because you stopped seducing yourself with illusions. Freud saw that neurosis happens when desire is repressed. Jung saw that suffering happens when integration is avoided. And the man who doesn't do the work will always seek the feminine to complete him, and will always be disappointed when she doesn't, because she wasn't meant to complete you. She was meant to awaken you, to agitate the part of you that still waits for love to crown you worthy. So, how do you break the pattern? You learn to sit with longing, without running. You learn to hold yourself, without performance. You learn to stop chasing women who reflect your unworthiness, and start becoming a man who mirrors his own clarity. You stop blaming her for the storm. You become the sky. If this resonated, take a moment to subscribe. Drop a comment below, not for the algorithm, but to mark this chapter in your journey. If you made it this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering, returning, reclaiming your inner ground. So trust that the video YouTube shows you next, the one appearing now, is not random. It's the next doorway, the next layer, and it will meet you exactly where you are. We'll see you in the next depth. Depthoria continues.